The blazing Wyoming sun poured down on Ruby Steele as the stagecoach groaned to a halt, dust rising in gritty swirls around the wooden wheels. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It was 1878, and Ruby had crossed nearly 2,000 miles from Boston, clutching the promise of a teaching job in a booming frontier settlement called Whispering Pines. "This is your stop, ma'am," the driver called, eyes squinting against the hard light, his face creased like worn saddle leather. "Rattlesnake Ranch," just like the ticket says. Ruby leaned out her heart, sinking at the sight of weathered barns and empty corrals. The ad she'd answered had promised a thriving cattle spread with families eager for a school. What she saw looked closer to a forgotten outpost than a living ranch. "There must be some mistake," she said, gathering her skirts and stepping down carefully. "I was supposed to go to Morgan Ranch." The driver just shrugged and tossed down her trunk. "Paper says Rattlesnake, ma'am. This is it. Next coach won't pass for 2 weeks. Next coach." He clucked to his team and rattled off, leaving Ruby alone with her luggage and the endless prairie wind. Her throat tightened. After her father's death had left her without a dime, this teaching position was her chance to stand on her own. Now it all felt like some cruel trick. Hoofbeats broke the silence. Ruby turned, shading her eyes. A lone rider emerged from the hills, a tall man in a sweat-darkened hat, broad-shouldered his horse, moving with effortless power. As he drew close, she caught more a sun-bronzed face touched with stubble, storm-gray eyes that missed nothing, clothes broken in by honest labor. He reined in a few feet away and studied her with frank curiosity. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "looks like you're a bit lost." "I think I am," Ruby admitted, steadying her voice. "I was headed for Morgan Ranch to teach school, but the driver swore this was my stop, Rattlesnake Ranch." A slow grin deepened the dimple in his cheek. "Morgan Ranch hasn't gone by that name in 3 years. A rattler bit the old owner, and the new name stuck. You're right where you're meant to be, though we didn't expect you till next week." Heat flushed Ruby's face. "Then I'm early. I'm sorry for the confusion. No apology needed." Swinging down from his saddle, he removed his hat, dark hair curling at the ends. "Clay Maddox, foreman here." He offered a hand roughened by reins and rope. "Ruby Steele, pleased to meet you, Mr. Maddox. Call me Clay," he said with a warm squeeze before releasing her. His gaze swept over her Boston traveling dress and the heavy trunks. "You've come a long way." "From Boston," she confirmed. "It's a haul," Clay said, picking up her trunk, as though it weighed nothing. "The main herds are over the ridge. This old house is where you'll stay, and the school's just down the trail." Relief steadied Ruby's heart. Maybe fate hadn't stranded her after all. As they walked toward the house, what had looked broken from a distance revealed solid timbers, clean windows, and a small garden bright with late summer blooms. "Not what you pictured, huh?" Clay asked softly, reading her thoughts. "I confess for a moment I thought I'd landed at the wrong ranch entirely." He paused at the porch steps and met her eyes with quiet certainty. "No, this is exactly where you belong." Something in his voice sent an unexpected tremor through her chest. Inside, sunlight pooled on scrubbed floors and simple furniture. A woman in her 50s stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron and smiling wide. "You must be our new schoolmarm," she said. "Name's Nettie Blake, cook and housekeeper. We didn't figure on you so soon, but your room's ready." "Thank you," Ruby said, grateful for the welcome. "I hope I haven't caused trouble." "Nonsense," Nettie replied. "We're mighty glad you're here. The youngsters have been talking about you for weeks." Clay set Ruby's trunk inside with an easy strength, and for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt the strange pull of home. "I'd best get back to work," Clay Maddox said, brushing the dust from his gloves. "But you're in good hands with Nettie. Our boss, Grant Mercer, will want a word with you come supper time." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Maddox." Ruby Steele replied politely. "Clay," he corrected with a quick grin that softened his rugged face. "Welcome to Rattlesnake Ranch, Miss Steele." When he left, Nettie Blake led Ruby to a neat, plain room at the back of the house. "It's not fancy like back east," Nettie said, "but it's private and cozy." "It's perfect," Ruby said with honest relief. After crowded trains and a jolting stagecoach, the small, spotless space felt like a quiet haven. "Rest up," Nettie advised. "Supper's at 6 sharp. The men come in hungry, and Grant Mercer doesn't take kindly to latecomers." Alone at last, Ruby sat on the narrow bed, her mind alive with the sights and sounds of her new world. The foreman's storm-gray eyes and his talk of fate lingered in her thoughts. She changed out of her dusty travel dress, slipping into a simple blue gown, better suited to ranch life, washed up at the basin, and pinned her sun-streaked hair in a tidy bun. Weeks of hard travel had left her thinner and more freckled than she remembered. At the stroke of 6, Nettie's dinner bell rang through the house. Ruby stepped into the dining room, where a long table of ranch hands stood politely as she entered. At the head waited a tall, silver-haired man with a trim beard. "Miss Steele, welcome," he said, voice deep and steady. "I'm Grant Mercer, owner here. Please join us." Ruby sat beside him, feeling every curious glance. Across the table, Clay had cleaned up, but still wore the air of a man who belonged outdoors. "Gentleman," Grant announced, "this is Miss Ruby Steele, our new school teacher. Treat her with the respect she deserves." Low greetings circled the table. Grace was said, and the meal began: roast beef, garden vegetables, fresh bread, simple but hearty. "How was the trip?" Miss Steele, Grant asked as he passed a platter. "Long, but I learned plenty along the way," Ruby answered. "I've never crossed the Mississippi before. It's a different life out here," one of the older cowboys remarked. "Takes some getting used to." "I'm ready to learn," Ruby said with quiet resolve. "Especially about the people and children I'll be teaching. Clay can show you around tomorrow," Grant decided. "The schoolhouse could use some care before classes start." "Happy to, sir," Clay said. Talk shifted to cattle prices, the weather, and local happenings. Ruby listened closely, stealing a glance now and then at Clay, who caught her eye with a look that sent a faint heat into her cheeks. After supper, the men drifted back to the bunkhouse. Ruby stayed to help Nettie clear the table, despite gentle protests. "You're not hired help," Nettie chided. "You're the school marm." "I like being useful," Ruby said with a smile. "And I enjoy the company." Nettie's sternness softened. "It can be lonely for a young woman out here, but you'll find your place. The children will love you. They've been making do with scraps of lessons when anyone had the time." "What about their parents?" Ruby asked, stacking dishes. "Mostly widows or widowers," Nettie replied. "Life out here can turn hard in a heartbeat. Some of the older boys haven't had schooling in years. They'd rather be cowboys than scholars." "Then I'll just have to make learning worth their while," Ruby said firmly. "That's the spirit," Nettie said with a nod. "Now get some rest. Clay will be waiting at first light. He's always up with the sun." Ruby slept lightly, her dreams alive with endless plains and a gray-eyed cowboy who spoke of destiny. Before dawn, she dressed in her most practical skirt and blouse, tying her hair back with a plain ribbon. The kitchen already hummed with life. Nettie kneaded bread dough while Clay nursed a cup of coffee. He rose when Ruby entered. "Morning, Miss Steele. Ready to see your schoolhouse?" "Very much so," Ruby said, accepting a steaming mug Nettie offered. Though I confess I'm a bit nervous about what I might find. It's sound, Clay assured her. Just needs a woman's touch. After a quick breakfast, they stepped outside. The early air was crisp, carrying the clean scent of sage and pine beneath a wide Wyoming sky. It's beautiful here, Ruby said, breaking their comfortable silence. Different from Boston, I'd wager, Clay replied. In every way, she admitted, smiling. But I don't miss the city as much as I thought I would. What pulled you all this way? He asked, matching his stride to hers. Most Eastern ladies steer clear of frontier life. Ruby hesitated, then spoke quietly. My father passed away last year. He taught at Harvard, but illness drained what little we had. When he died, I was left with no real prospects. She lifted her chin, steady and proud. Teaching has always been my calling, Ruby Steele, said her voice quiet but steady. When I saw the notice for a teacher out west, it felt like Providence guiding me. Clay Maddox studied her with fresh respect. Takes grit to ride halfway across the country alone. Or maybe desperation, Ruby answered with a small, self-mocking laugh. Clay shook his head. Plenty of desperate folks never find the backbone to start over. You did. They climbed a grassy ridge, and Ruby caught her breath. Below spread the heart of Rattlesnake Ranch, a sprawling barn, busy corrals full of horses and cattle, bunkhouses and sheds, alive with men, moving briskly about their work. Now this is closer to what I pictured, she said, delighted. Told you there's more to this ranch than a few empty buildings, Clay replied with a grin. Beyond the corrals, in a cluster of cottonwoods, stood a small, whitewashed building with a bell on its peak. Your schoolhouse, Clay said, leading her downhill. Up close, the little structure told a harsher truth. Sagging steps, peeling paint windows veiled in dust. When did it last hold class? Ruby asked, pushing open the creaky door. About a year back, Clay said, stepping inside. The last teacher left sudden after butting heads with Grant Mercer over what the kids ought to learn. Ruby looked over rows of mismatched desks, the pot-bellied stove in the corner, and a chalkboard scarred by years of use. And what was the quarrel? She wanted only books and history. Grant said they need math ranch skills, things to keep them alive. Ruby's eyes swept the room, already seeing the promise beneath the dust. Children need both. Beauty feeds the soul, but know-how keeps you standing. That's exactly what I told Grant when he weighed your application, Clay said, leaning against the doorframe. Ruby turned surprised. You had a say in hiring me? A faint flush crossed his tanned face. I may have slipped in a good word. Your letters showed real fire for teaching, not just a paycheck. Thank you, Ruby said softly. I won't let you down. I never figured you would, he replied, gentle as a summer breeze. They spent the morning sweeping floors, washing windows, and shaking off a year of neglect. Ruby was heartened to find a small cabinet of well-kept books. Most came from past teachers, Clay explained, helping her sort them. Some are from Grant's own shelves. By midday, the schoolhouse looked alive again. They sat on the front steps to eat the lunch Nettie Blake had packed: cold chicken crusty bread and crisp apple slices. Tell me about the children, Ruby said between bites. They're a lively bunch. Clay chuckled. The Nash twins, Zeke and Luke, are 8, bright as lightning, but double the mischief. Rose Boone is 12, and probably the best reader in the county. Her brother Jesse Boone, 16, thinks he's too old for books, but numbers come natural to him. Ruby smiled, eager to meet them all. And the quiet girl you mentioned earlier, that's Lila Mercer Grant's granddaughter. Lost her folks in a fire 3 years ago. Hasn't spoken since. Grant hopes maybe you can reach her. Ruby's heart tightened. Poor child. I'll do everything I can. A sudden drumming of hooves cut the calm. A young rider galloped up, face flushed. He shouted, swinging down hard. Trouble at the north pasture. Rustlers hit overnight. Buck Riker counts 30 head missing. Clay sprang to his feet, all easy warmth replaced by sharp command. "Round up the men. I'll meet you there." He turned to Ruby. "I hate to leave you alone." "Don't worry," she said quickly. "I can find my way back. It's a fair walk. I'll manage. This is home now. I should learn my way around." Something flickered in his gray eyes. "Home," he echoed quietly. "Yes, I suppose it is." With practiced ease, he swung into the young man's saddle. "Stay on the main trail. No shortcuts, no matter how tempting." Ruby watched him ride off, struck by how swiftly he shifted from friendly guide to decisive foreman. Her walk back gave her time to take in the vast land around her, no longer foreign, but wide and free. What had seemed lonely yesterday now felt like possibility. Back at the ranch, most of the men were gone. She found Nettie as the garden sleeves rolled and basket brimming with vegetables. "There you are," Nettie called. "I heard the news. Rustlers again. Seems they're getting bolder." "Is it dangerous?" Ruby asked, worry edging her voice. "It can be," Nettie said, pressing a hand to her back. "Most thieves run when caught, but some stand their ground. Clay knows what he's doing, though. He's handled worse. He's been looking after things for Grant Mercer since he was hardly more than a boy," Nettie Blake said, as she gathered the garden's last carrots. "How long has Clay worked here?" Ruby. Steele asked, slipping another vegetable into the basket. "Coming on 15 years. Rode in at 16, half-starved and dead broke. Grant put him straight to work with the horses." Nettie's face softened with the memory. "That boy had a way with animals like I'd never seen. By 25, he was foreman." Ruby tucked that detail away, sketching a fuller picture of the quiet, storm-eyed cowboy. "He seems bound to this place," she said. "This ranch is his whole world," Nettie agreed, then cast Ruby a knowing look, though he might make room for something or someone if the right chance came along. Before Ruby could reply, a slim figure stepped from behind the fence, a girl with serious eyes and long blonde braids watching in silence. "Hello there," Ruby said gently. "You must be Lila Mercer." The child didn't speak, but didn't retreat either. Nettie nodded encouragement. "Lila, this is Miss Steele, the new teacher we told you about." Ruby knelt so their eyes met. "I'm so pleased to meet you. I was just helping Mrs. Blake with the garden. Would you like to join us?" After a pause, Lila moved closer and carefully chose a carrot, brushing dirt from it with patient fingers. "She loves the garden?" Nettie said softly. "Spends hours out here when the weather allows." "Gardens are wonderful places," Ruby agreed, speaking directly to Lila. "My mother tended one back in Boston. She always said plants are like people, each need something different to grow strong." Lila's small hands stilled for a heartbeat, though she kept her gaze on the carrot. "Some need full sun," Ruby continued. "Others thrive in shade. Some like constant care, while others do better when left alone to find their own way. The real trick is learning what each one needs." For the briefest moment, Lila looked up, her eyes meeting Ruby's, before returning to her task. It was only a flicker, but it filled Ruby with quiet hope. Trust, she knew, came slowly to a child marked by loss. The rest of the afternoon passed in a calm rhythm. Ruby helped Nettie prepare supper, while Lila stayed close, a silent shadow observing every move. As twilight settled, the ranch hands rode in dusty and tired. Ruby's heart eased when Clay Maddox appeared in the doorway, clothes streaked with trail dust, and a small cut on his cheek, but otherwise unharmed. "Everything all right?" Grant asked as Clay took his seat. "Recovered most of the herd," Clay reported. "Caught one rustler named Rex Dugan. Marshal Hank Rourke has him in town. No serious injuries on our side." The meal was quieter than the night before. The men worn out from the chase spoke little. Ruby noticed Clay's steady gratitude as he thanked Nettie for each dish, and the gentle way he bent to let Lila dab the cut on his face. Later, when the house had quieted, and Nettie worked in the kitchen, Ruby found Clay sitting on the porch steps, eyes lifted to a sky alive with stars. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly. He shifted, making room. "Of course." Ruby sat beside him, careful to keep a proper space. "Thank you for showing me the schoolhouse today. I can't wait to begin lessons. The children will start coming by tomorrow," Clay said. "News travels fast out here." They sat for a time in companionable silence, night air cool and scented with sage. "I met Lila today," Ruby finally said. "She strikes me as remarkably bright." "She is," Clay replied. "Before the fire, she never stopped singing and asking questions. Now," he exhaled. "Grant worries. We all do." "Trauma settles differently in everyone," Ruby said gently. "Some wounds need more time to heal." "You speak as if you know," Clay observed. Ruby hesitated. "My mother died when I was 12. I barely spoke for almost a year. My father reached me again through books we read each night. The words on those pages eventually brought back my own." Clay turned toward her, his gaze thoughtful. "You understand more than most, then. I only know healing can't be forced," Ruby said. "But caring people make all the difference." Their eyes met in the silver wash of moonlight. A soft flutter stirred in Ruby's chest, under the quiet intensity of his gaze. "You're not what I expected," Ruby Steele Clay said at last. "What did you expect?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A wry smile tugged at his mouth. "Someone more conventional. Eastern ladies usually arrive full of plans to civilize us rough Westerners." Ruby laughed, the sound low and warm, the wide prairie night wrapping gently around them. "I promise you I've no plans to civilize the West," Ruby Steele said with a quick smile. "If anything, I'm here to learn as much as I teach." "That right there," Clay Maddox replied, "is why you fit here like rain on dry ground." The days that followed settled into a steady, satisfying rhythm. Each morning, Ruby threw herself into readying the schoolhouse. Afternoons, she welcomed curious youngsters who would soon be her pupils. And evenings, she absorbed stories of ranch life from Nettie Blake Grant Mercer and sometimes Clay when chores released him. Soon, the one-room school no longer looked forgotten. Fresh paint brightened the clapboard's curtains Nettie stitched from attic fabric softened the windows, and each day Lila Mercer quietly left wildflowers in jars along the sills. Children who at first hung back warmed to Ruby's lively way of turning lessons into adventure. As Clay had warned, 16-year-old Jessie Boone tested her patience, claiming I ought to be working cattle, not sittin' at a desk. "Learning is work," Ruby answered evenly, "the kind that lasts a lifetime." "What good's reading out here?" Jessie challenged. "How will you keep from being cheated on a cattle deal without math?" she countered. "How will you write contracts, read market reports, or bargain with distant buyers without strong reading and writing?" Jessie found no quick retort. Seeing his interest in maps, Ruby began weaving geography and land surveying into her lessons, and his resistance slowly eased. 8-year-old twins Zeke and Luke Nash lived up to their reputation, bright, mischievous, always 2 steps ahead. Ruby discovered that challenging their quick minds was the surest way to keep order. Lila attended faithfully silent but intent. Though she never spoke, her careful handwriting revealed a keen intelligence. Ruby made it a ritual to sit with her a few minutes each day, sometimes reading aloud, sometimes simply working side by side. One late afternoon, about 2 weeks after Ruby's arrival, she was chalking out the next day's lessons when the schoolhouse door creaked open. "We're finished for today," she called without looking. "Unless someone wants to help clean erasers." "I wouldn't mind," came a deep, familiar voice. Ruby spun around, nearly dropping her chalk. Clay stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking almost shy. "Sorry to intrude," he said. "I was riding by and saw your light." "I'm just setting up for tomorrow," Ruby said, brushing dust from her palms. "Did you need something?" He shifted his weight. "Actually, I was wondering if you'd ride with me tomorrow after class. There's a place I'd like to show you." A spark of anticipation flickered inside her. "I'd like that very much." His grin lit his whole face. "I'll have a horse saddled for you once the children leave." The next day, Ruby found it hard to keep her thoughts on lessons. When the last student waved goodbye, she quickly tidied the room and changed into a riding skirt Nettie had cleverly altered from one of Grant's late wife's gowns. Outside, Clay waited with 2 horses, his chestnut gelding, and a gentle bay mare. "Meet Daisy," he said, steadying the mare as Ruby mounted. "She's calm and sure-footed, perfect for a city gal still learning the saddle." Ruby settled into the seat. "I'll have you know I've been practicing. Nettie says I'm a natural." Clay's eyes crinkled. "Nettie would call you a natural even if you fell off every other minute, just to be kind." With an easy swing, he mounted his gelding. Ready, they rode out along a narrow trail winding through sage and wildflowers. The vast Wyoming territory stretched in endless beauty, so unlike Boston's crowded streets and clipped gardens that Ruby felt she was breathing for the first time. "Where are we headed?" she asked as they crested a rise. "You'll see," Clay said with a teasing glint. The path climbed steadily, pines thickening as the air turned crisp. After nearly an hour, they passed through a dense stand of evergreens that opened suddenly onto a hidden meadow. Ruby caught her breath. A small valley lay before them, carpeted with wildflowers. A silver stream threading through it, distant mountains etched against a flawless blue sky. "It's breathtaking," she whispered, dismounting when Clay did. "I found it my first year on the ranch," he said, tying the reins. "Whenever life gets too heavy, I come here to remember there's more than work and worry." "Thank you for bringing me," Ruby said softly. They spread a blanket near the stream, sharing bread, cheese-dried fruit, and cool water from a canteen. Clay listened with keen interest as Ruby described the children's progress. "Lila Mercer wrote a full sentence today," she told him with pride. "She hasn't spoken yet, but her writing is remarkable." "That's wonderful news," Clay said. "Grant will be mighty pleased." "I believe she'll speak when she's ready," Ruby added. "In her own time." Clay studied her thoughtful. "You've a rare gift, Ruby. You don't just teach lessons, you see what folks truly need." Ruby felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "I try to pay attention. People are like plants, each needs something different to grow strong." He chuckled. "So you think of Rattlesnake Ranch as a garden to tend?" "Maybe," she said, with a soft laugh, "though I feel more like a new seedling myself." Clay's rich laugh echoed through the quiet meadow. "A poet, as well as a school teacher." "Hardly," Ruby protested, smiling despite herself. As the afternoon waned, Ruby Steele and Clay Maddox wandered beside the sparkling stream, gathering wildflowers and trading stories, books they loved, far-off places. They once dreamed of quiet hopes they'd never spoken aloud. Ruby heard herself sharing thoughts she'd never voiced to another soul, while Clay listened with a focus that made her feel truly seen. "I never planned to settle in Wyoming," he admitted, as they turned back toward the horses. "Figured I'd work a few years, save up, then buy land farther west, maybe Oregon." "What changed your mind?" Ruby asked. "Rattlesnake Ranch became home," Clay said simply. "Grant became the father I never had. The folks here, they're family." "Family is a treasure," Ruby said softly, "especially when you've lost your own." Clay stopped, meeting her eyes. "Ruby, A sudden crack of thunder cut him off. Both looked skyward to see dark clouds piling fast over the mountains. "We need to move," he said sharply. "These valleys flood quick when a storm hits." They hurried to their horses as fat raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached the trees, rain poured in heavy sheets, and thunder rolled like cannon fire. "Stay close," Clay shouted over the roar. "There's a line shack about 20 minutes ahead." They urged the horses forward at a careful trot, the trail slick and treacherous. Within minutes, Ruby was drenched, her hands numb on the reins, but she kept Daisy steady behind Clay's gelding. Lightning split the sky the following crash, spooking both animals. Daisy reared hard. Despite Ruby's grip, she lost her seat and hit the ground with a jolt that stole her breath. Clay was at her side in an instant, mud splashing around them. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, worry etched deep across his face. Ruby forced air back into her lungs. "Just knocked the wind out," she said, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Relief softened his features. "Think you can ride?" She nodded. He helped her back onto Daisy and tied a lead rope to keep the mare steady the rest of the way. Through the downpour, a small cabin finally emerged, a rough line shack used by cowboys caught far from the main house. Clay swung down first, helped Ruby dismount, and led the horses beneath a lean-to before ushering her inside. The shelter was spare, but dry, a small iron stove, rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, a narrow cot, and shelves of basic supplies. Clay set to work lighting the stove while Ruby stood dripping, chilled to the bone. "You need to change out of those wet clothes," he said matter-of-factly, rummaging through a trunk for spare garments. "They'll be big on you, but they're dry." He handed her a flannel shirt and trousers, then turned toward the door. "I'll see to the horses while you change." When he returned, Ruby wore the borrowed clothes, her own dress hanging near the stove. Her loosened hair tumbled about her shoulders as she combed out the tangles. Clay paused in the doorway, momentarily caught by the sight. "I must look a fright," Ruby said with a tentative laugh. "No," he said quietly. "You look—" He cleared his throat. "The storm's getting worse. We'll be here till morning. The horses are settled." Ruby's heart quickened at the thought of sharing the tiny cabin overnight. Improper or not, there was no choice. Clay changed into dry clothes and set out a simple meal from the stores, bread, jerky, and dried fruit. They ate to the sound of wind and rain hammering the roof. After a while, Ruby asked, "What will folks think when we don't come back tonight? They'll know we sought shelter." "No one will question it," Clay said, adding wood to the stove. His gray eyes held hers. "Your good name is safe. I'll see to that." "I trust you," Ruby said softly, and knew she meant every word. Darkness deepened the storm, unrelenting. Clay insisted she take the cot while he spread a blanket on the floor, but sleep was hard to catch with him so near. "Clay," she whispered into the quiet. "Are you awake?" "Yes," came his low reply. "What were you about to say earlier before the thunder?" He shifted slightly. "I was going to say that life takes turns you don't see coming. The moment I saw you at the stage stop, looking lost and strong, all at once I knew things at Rattlesnake Ranch were about to change. Change how Ruby asked, her pulse quickening. Make the place feel more like home than it already did," he said after a pause. "I felt lost that day," Ruby admitted. "When you told me I was exactly where I was meant to be, that it was fate, I thought you were only being kind. I meant every word," Clay said quietly. "From the first moment I knew you belonged here. When morning broke clear and bright, it was as if the storm had never swept through." They rode back side by side, the unspoken warmth between them stronger than ever. Just as Clay predicted, no one at the ranch made anything of their overnight delay. Nettie merely handed Ruby a steaming cup of tea and hurried her off to change before the children arrived. The days that followed brimmed with secret smiles and brief, deliberate touches, tiny sparks of feeling that promised more than words could yet say. Ruby Steele found her eyes following Clay Maddox more often than she cared to admit, her heart quickening whenever he appeared. She sometimes caught him watching her too. his gray eyes holding a warmth that sent a quiet flush across her cheeks. A month after Ruby's arrival at Rattlesnake Ranch, the whole community gathered to celebrate the end of spring roundup. Long tables lined the yard beside the main house lanterns, swayed between posts, and a small band of local fiddlers and guitar pickers filled the cool evening with lively music. Children and grown-ups alike danced on a wooden platform built just for the night. Ruby wore her finest blue cotton dress with white lace at the collar and cuffs. Nettie Blake had helped arrange her hair, leaving soft curls to frame her face. Stepping out into the golden twilight, Ruby's eyes searched the crowd for Clay. She spotted him beside Grant Mercer, looking more striking than ever in clean trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a dark vest. His beard was neatly trimmed, though one stubborn lock of hair still curled across his forehead. When he noticed her, his entire face brightened. Miss Steele Grant said warmly, "This celebration owes much to your planning." "I only lent Nettie a hand," Ruby protested. "Nonsense," Grant replied with a laugh. "You've breathed new life into this place. The children are thriving. Lila is writing again, and even the ranch hands have polished their manners. And I haven't seen this fellow so spruced up since last year's harvest dance." He clapped Clay on the shoulder with a grin. Clay looked a bit sheepish, but pleased. "Would you care to dance, Miss Steele?" he asked, extending his arm. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Maddox," Ruby answered, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. The fiddlers launched into a lively reel, and Clay proved to be an accomplished dancer, guiding her with easy confidence. Ruby's laughter mingled with the music as they circled and spun her earlier concerns about propriety forgotten. When the music eased into a slow waltz, Clay drew her closer, his hand steady at her waist. "You look beautiful tonight," he said softly, eyes never leaving hers. "Thank you," Ruby replied, suddenly shy. "You look mighty handsome yourself." For a time they danced in quiet harmony, the space between them charged with meaning. Ruby Clay began, his voice low. "There's something I need to tell you." A sudden commotion cut him off. A lone rider burst into the clearing, his horse flecked with foam. The music died as all eyes turned. "Rustlers," the young man gasped, stumbling toward Grant. "A big gang headed for the east pasture. They've already fired on 2 of our men." The joyous evening dissolved into urgent motion. Men grabbed rifles and swung into saddles. Women pulled children close. Grant's voice carried sharp orders across the yard. Clay squeezed Ruby's hand once, reluctant to let go. "I have to ride," he said, his face drawn tight. "I know," Ruby said, swallowing her fear. "Please be careful." He caught her hand again, pressing it to his lips in a swift, fierce gesture before running to join the others. Ruby stood rooted as the riders thundered off into the dark. Nettie appeared at her side, her face grave. "Come, child. We need to ready for wounded." The next hours blurred into hard work. Ruby and Nettie boiled water-tore sheets for bandages and prepared rooms for the hurt they expected. Some of the older boys, including Jesse Boone, had ridden with the men, and Ruby prayed for them as fervently as she prayed for Clay. Near dawn, the first group returned, bringing 3 injured cowboys. Nettie and the ranch's unofficial doctor, Doc Levi Grant, tended them swiftly. The wounds were painful, but not fatal, and Ruby felt a rush of relief. More riders straggled in as the sun climbed, dusty and weary, but mostly safe. Ruby scanned each group for Clay, her worry growing with every passing hour. At last, Grant Mercer rode in his face, grim but steady. "The rustlers are scattered," he reported. "Marshal Hank Rourke has their survivors in custody. We lost some cattle, but it could have been far worse." "And our men?" Nettie asked, voicing the question Ruby could not. "No deaths, thank the Lord," Grant answered. "Buck Riker took a bullet in the shoulder. Jesse Boone earned a gash that'll leave a scar. He'll brag on for years." He paused, reading the fear in Ruby's eyes. Clay's fine. He and a few others are rounding up strays. Ruby's knees weakened with gratitude. Thank you for telling me, she managed. Late that afternoon, Clay finally appeared, riding slow into the yard. Ruby, who had kept watch from the porch, rushed to meet him. He looked bone-tired, a bruise shadowing his jaw, and a torn sleeve exposing a freshly bandaged arm. "You're hurt," she said, reaching for him without thinking. "It's nothing," Clay assured her, catching her hands in his. "Just a scratch." Ruby suddenly realized they were standing in plain sight of the ranch hands, their hands clasped, but she couldn't bring herself to pull away. "I was so worried," she whispered. His expression softened. "I promised I'd come back, didn't I?" "You never made such a promise," she said, her voice trembling. "Then I'm making it now," Clay said solemnly. "I'll always come back to you, Ruby Steele." Before she could speak, a small figure darted between them. Lila Mercer. Her face, streaked with tears, flung herself into Clay's arms. He dropped to his knees at once, holding the child close. "It's all right, little one," he murmured. "Everything's all right now." You promised, Lila." Mercer hiccuped, her small voice rough from years of silence. "You promised you wouldn't leave like Mama and Papa." Ruby Steele pressed a hand to her mouth, stunned. Lila had just spoken her first words in 3 long years, and she spoke them straight to Clay Maddox in a moment of raw need. "That's right," Clay said gently, emotion tightening his voice. "I gave you my word. And here I am, just like I said I'd be." Lila buried her face against his shoulder, her little body shaking with sobs. "I was so scared. I know, sweetheart. I know." Clay held her close, his eyes finding Ruby's over the child's head. In that look, they shared the miracle of what had just happened. That evening, after Lila finally fell asleep, worn out from so many new words, Ruby found Clay on the porch steps, much as he'd been on that quiet night weeks earlier. "Doc Levi Grant says your arm will heal without trouble," Ruby said as she sat beside him. "Told you it was just a scratch," Clay answered with a weary smile. They watched the stars bloom across the Wyoming sky in companionable silence until Ruby spoke again. "Lila's been talking to Grant almost non-stop. It's as if a dam finally broke." "Fear does strange things," Clay said thoughtfully. "Sometimes it locks our voice away. Sometimes it forces us to speak." "What have you feared most?" Ruby asked softly. He turned to her, the fading light carving his face in quiet resolve. "Losing something I hadn't even truly found yet." Ruby's breath caught. "And what was that?" "A life with you." He took her hand, his touch sure and warm. "I wanted to ask you last night before everything interrupted us. I know it's early, you've only been here a month, but I can't picture Rattlesnake Ranch without you. I can't picture my life without you." Her heart pounded so hard she felt certain he could hear it. "What are you asking Clay Maddox?" "I'm asking if you'd consider staying not only as the school teacher, but someday as my wife when you're ready." "Ruby, I love you. I think I started falling the moment you stood in that dusty yard insisting you'd been sent to the wrong ranch." Tears pricked Ruby's eyes. "I'm not sure when it happened for me," she said, voice trembling. "But somewhere between your talk of fate and that storm-swept night in the line shack, I knew my heart had found its home not just in this place, but with you." Clay's face lit with pure joy. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she whispered, her smile as bright as his. "Though maybe we should have a proper courtship first for form's sake." "Whatever you wish," he agreed, kissing her hand. "But you should know out here propriety bends with the prairie wind." Ruby laughed light as she'd felt in years. "So I'm learning." Beneath the velvet Wyoming night, with the ranch settling quiet around them, Clay Maddox leaned in, and kissed Ruby Steele for the first time, a tender, reverent kiss that carried the promise of every tomorrow ahead. 1 year later, Ruby stood inside the schoolhouse where her western adventure had begun, now draped with wildflowers and bright ribbons. Beside her, Lila, no longer silent, but chattering with delight, helped arrange the veil over Ruby's dark hair. "You look beautiful, Miss Ruby," Lila declared, "like a princess in a storybook." "Thank you, sweetheart," Ruby said, smoothing the skirt of her simple wedding dress, lovingly sewn with Nettie's help from fine Denver fabric. Nettie appeared in the doorway, eyes shining. "It's time, dear. Everyone's waiting, and that man of yours is about to wear a path clear through the yard with his pacing." Ruby drew a deep breath, her heart brimming with joy. In the year since her fateful arrival, so much had changed. The school now welcomed children from miles around. Lila had blossomed into a bright, talkative girl, and Ruby herself had found a purpose, a home, and a family she'd once thought beyond her reach. Outside, neighbors and ranch hands gathered, even Marshal Hank Rourke from town. At the end of a flower-strewn path stood Clay, his eyes fixed on her with a love that felt like warm sunlight. Grant Mercer offered his arm. "Ready, Miss Steele? Though I reckon I won't be calling you that much longer." "I've been ready since the day I arrived," Ruby said with a radiant smile. "Even if I didn't know it then." As she walked toward her future husband, she thought of the strange twist of fate, a mix-up in a ranch name, a dusty first meeting, and a gray-eyed cowboy who once spoke of destiny. Clay had been right all along. This had never been the wrong ranch. It was exactly where she was meant to be. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.